Welcome back to your weekly dose of motivation here at the Motivating Force. This week you have Josue, an aspiring Marine Corps officer who's finishing up ROTC and his bachelor's in the criminal justice field. And myself, Justin, a motivational speaker who's always more than excited to share whatever topic we have on the table this week. So let's jump right into it.
So this week we're going to be talking about the problems that come from the extreme betas and the extreme alphas in our society when it comes to the male perspective, because we're going to be leaning towards that since we don't have any experience as a female. So this is probably something that females can learn a little something about the male dilemma and why we range and our groups tend to be a little bit too much beta, too much alpha. But throughout today's episode and Wednesday's episode, it's going to be a two-part series explaining the common ground that we should all be shooting for.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like you're saying, it's great. We're going to teach a lot of things here to some gentlemen out there, some guys out there. And of course, for all the female listeners, there's plenty for you to take away as well. So we hope everybody enjoys as we get into it.
Yeah. And real quick, before we actually start the episode, I wanted to say that we're sorry because we know a few of you have been wanting the vlogs that we've been putting out. And unfortunately, when we started our Thanksgivings and we're going house to house and we saw all the food in front of us, we got a little bit too hungry, a little bit too excited, and we forgot to pull out our phones or cameras and record for you guys. So missing out the content there, but the vlog should be coming out shortly and steadily. Right now, we're just going to be jumping right into the episode. Just wanted to put that out there and apologize.
Yeah. So getting right into it, I just wanted to start us off here. Obviously, we are talking about the different types of men. So we're going to be hitting on the alphas, the betas, right? Some of those nicknames that we have for them today is, the chads and the simps. And then we're going to be talking about more of the moderate man, the gentleman. And there is a good comparison here done by brainboostedshop.com that I wanted to read real quick. It kind of summarizes it perfectly in my mind. Of course, that description or that link is in the description down below. But they say, what's the difference between a simp and a gentleman? They say a gentleman is a chivalrous, courteous, and honorable man that not only respects others, but also himself. A gentleman has goals and the ambition to achieve them. A gentleman is charming, particularly to a lady, but is not a gentle man and knows what he wants in life. A simp, on the other hand, doesn't treat women with respect, or themselves for that matter, as they are manipulatively trying to impress a woman, by bending over backwards for her.
Yeah. And real quick, because you're aiming that way, I wanted to also throw in another disclaimer that this discussion, it could be for all sorts of men, no matter what sexual orientation you choose to be, because you can still be a beta, you can still be an alpha or a gentleman, whether you're straight, gay, bi, or whatever adjective you choose to use for yourself. So like, even though we pulled that from the internet and it has a straight example, you could use this for all types of sexual orientation. So just using that as a disclaimer as we get into this.
Yeah, bending over backwards for other dudes if you're gay. I mean, it's the same thing applied. It's just the pronouns that we're using here today. So don't take that part of it too close to home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So to start, since these are kind of general words that we use for like beta and alpha or simp and like a chad, we're going to explain to you what each one is, definition, and some examples, so then you can actually form a clearer understanding of what we're talking about. Because for beta, the way I understand it is that it's just when you fall too far as a beta, right, you're doing more damage to yourself and your life than you really are to others. Because like you said, you're bending over backwards for other people. You know, you're not knowing your worth and you're not going to gain any respect from that.
Yeah, not knowing your worth, by the way, I feel is also not only a beta issue, but an alpha issue. Because betas kind of come to accept the fact that their worth is less than what it should be, and alphas overvalue themselves, or the way that I kind of see it is it's more of an insecurity about their value. So a lot of times certain alphas can feel like their value might be less than what they want it to be, so they try to overcompensate for that.
Yeah, 100%. It's an ego problem when it comes to being an alpha. You have too much self-ego, and that's just taking it to the extreme, because then that's when we start talking about toxic masculinity, and then that you can go back to our first couple episodes. But going back to like a beta, it's very difficult to wrap your head around it, because sometimes they don't even know that they're being beta. You know, the way that we're like so sexually driven as a society now, that it's like it's in our human nature to just want to reproduce, right? So then you're going to do whatever you can to do that. And now we're getting people that are just going crazy for people that aren't even interested in them. You know, you're putting them up on this pedestal, and you're just wasting time. You're hurting yourself when you can be focused on something else and being productive, you know?
Yeah, I think there's I guess that'd be like an ill side effect of the internet. Because when you do talk back to your more natural and primitive instincts, as far as like, you know, your need to reproduce and all that, you're hitting some really deep core things inside of your mental state. And a lot of things that they've found out about your mental state, especially with the use of the internet, is that when you watch videos or whatever the case may be, when you're consuming media online, your brain can have a hard time differentiating between the realities of that and it just being something artificial on the internet.
Yes, because I even have this point down that it was like that betas just, they don't realize, well, once they realize, because we're talking about the extreme betas, we're not talking about just the casual beta. We're talking about the ones that are that can be a little cuckoo and can cause damage to society. So I have this point that when they start to realize that the world's not a Hollywood romance movie, you know, where you give everything to a woman, even if she starts out not being interested in you, you're gonna like do something magical and she's gonna fall head over heels for you. They're gonna start to get angry with the system, or even just women for having lied, you know, or not giving in to them for spending all this money and time on them. That they're gonna start lashing out at society, and those are when you start to have those incels, those involuntary celibates, you know, because they start hating women because this like one or two females just didn't like them. You know, those are the ones that start mass shootings. Those are the ones that are going to school because they were bullied, or, you know, like their crush didn't like them back.
Yeah.
That's when you get violent. That's where you get problems.
100%, man. It's crazy. And I think, of course, like we're saying, that mixture of the internet and the media consumption, and it really affects people. And it has a lot to do with modern society as well, where we tend to glorify mental illnesses. Just to be straight up, like, you know, of course not everybody, right? But there is a large group of people on the internet who will glorify those things. And it's like, you know, like going through high school, like almost every girl had depression or something like that because it was almost trendy to have it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, especially in certain groups, because when I was in school, you had like your jocks, you had your emo kids, you had, you know, so I was kind of all over the place, but my main group of friends were in that like emo goth group. And it's almost like trendy to be depressed because everybody that you're hanging out with is depressed. So you have to have that aesthetic to fit in with the clique, you know? But that's why it's super important to start knowing your worth and your value at a younger age. Because why are you going to put yourself through all of that when you really don't have those mental illnesses or things going on with yourself? You're just putting yourself down for no reason.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing with talking about the mental illness side of it, is that your mental illness is majority of the time influenced by your thoughts. So if you're trying to fit in with whatever crowd and like, depression's the trendy thing and or it's acceptable, like it's okay to be depressed and these things like that, and you try to force yourself like into that type of category to impress people because people do crazy things to impress others, you can start putting yourself in a cycle and believing these things that you're telling yourself. It's crazy. Because of course, mental illness is the real diagnosed psychiatric help type of depression and whatnot. They actually have some type of chemical imbalance going on.
Yeah.
There's a real physiological issue with that person. Whereas the other, I kind of want to say 80%, it's all just the psychological game. Yeah. And even though a lot of the people with the psychological issues will go see a psychiatrist and whatnot, a lot of that therapy just involves you just talking.
Yeah, because they're not the ones with that chemical imbalance. They're fine. It's just they just keep putting themselves down.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. But then going back on like combining this with the beta man, a lot of it does come from a lack of confidence, which is something that we were even talking about when you're trying to find that personal core value that you hold. Like, if you don't know your core values or what you're standing for, how are you going to have confidence on who you are?
Yeah.
So when like beta males, they're defined here as mediocre, careful man who avoids risk and confrontation. So the ones that are just like, oh, we don't need to fight, like I'm good. They're almost I don't want to use like a non-PC word for
it. It gets tough.
They're yeah. I don't want to get in trouble here, but they're the ones that seem to be like weak. When there's something that pops up in a restaurant, you're with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, and somebody confronts you and you're just like, no, I'm good. Like you back off. You don't try to protect the people that you're with.
Yeah. See, I think of that with like, you see the funny pictures on Facebook where they'll have like the bodybuilder and they're like, this guy comes up and slaps your girl's ass. What are you going to do? Right. And it's like a picture of like this 6'5", 300-pound freaking Polish dude that probably, pushes boats across the ocean with his hands, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm going to hit him square in the face and then I'm going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
So it's like...
That's a perfect example.
I get what you're saying, but it's like, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to stand my ground. And I know that's going to have some negative consequences in that case, but that's what it's about.
And you know what? That's a perfect transition because we're going to be going into the alphas. And the alphas, when you get too much of that extreme, it's going to be that giant Polish bodybuilder that's 6 foot and that's going to come up to your girl and slap her and ask you, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's when it starts to get a little bit too toxic, too alpha, like you answer to no man is the idea. Because we have these general concepts of what an alpha man is, but lately, I know when we were doing research, you were even telling me a lot of it's looked at as negative. Right? The society that we live in now, they tend to look at alpha males as a bad thing.
Yeah, even when it's done properly, right?
Yeah.
So like when we talk about like the red pill group and all that for men is like, it's extremely toxic and terrible according to society today.
As you're wearing a red shirt. No correlation. Anyway, moving on.
But it's because of the extremes that we're seeing in these red pill groups where they are all about like, the part that's funny to me is on the red pill group, when you're listening to some of their stuff, they have some really good points to make because no matter what you listen to, whatever group of people you listen to, everybody has a good point here and there. Right. And they talk about, I personally think those alphas, red pill type of thing where they talk about how to get women and whatnot, because there's a focal point on that for a percentage of that group. And they probably idolize women, idolize the sex more than the beta does.
Yeah, because they're the ones that are actually getting that. So they're just using it or taking it for granted and then using it on that same pedestal. They're just going about a different route.
Yeah, they're putting their whole worth based on it, and it's like, well, I slept with 4 women this week because I don't give a crap about them and I can just pull women out of a bar like nothing. And it's like, that's literally the same level of worship as you get when you get the betas who are just like, oh, I'm going to buy her flowers every day and I'm going to send her a piece of my hair and I'm going to, what I mean? And doing some crazy shit.
Sniff her hair all the time.
Yeah, like her scent's still on me a month later, like, because I didn't shower. And it's like,
I didn't wash my hand for a week.
Yeah. It's funny to me because it's the same crazy extreme idolization just on the other end of the spectrum, and somehow we're supposed to feel better about it one way or the other, and that's what we're here to talk about today, really.
Yeah, and it's a good point too, because like when I mentioned that betas, you're really doing damage to yourself and your life, but when you get that extreme alpha, that you're just being a douchebag at this point, you're hurting all those women, you're hurting all these men or whatever, you're hurting your friends, you're hurting your own reputation, my bad, with doing that, because then now you're just acting a fool. You're being a douchebag, all because you're trying to worship this sex with countless women because you think that's what your self-worth is coming from.
Yeah.
But I was also looking at it like, people tend to think that all these alphas now, all they're trying to do is be bullies, be those meatheads, those 6 foot tall jack dudes that are just bullying other people that don't look as strong as them. But in reality, strength is knowledge, like you were talking about last week. Strength is in the knowledge you hold, because nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
You can be ripped, super strong, but not know what 2 + 2 is. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, knowledge is definitely power, man. And I can't wait to get into that a little bit more, because the whole knowledge aspect of it is going to cover all categories. When we talk about alphas, betas, and gentlemen, the importance of knowledge in it, because there's a lot of things about your body you can't change, and we tie a lot of things about your body and place you in these different categories. And in reality, that's not what it's about. It's all about what's up here. So go ahead.
Yeah, because when you have those like inert traits of like having knowledge and seeking knowledge, you can go about being an alpha properly, because there's highly intelligent, confident, and successful alpha males that take up about 70% of senior executives in corporations, natural born leaders. And we can even go back to like tribe mentality, and you need that chieftain, you need that alpha in your pack to kind of lead everybody. You need leadership skills to be an alpha. You can't just be a beta that you're like, okay, yeah, I'll follow orders, blah, 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 blah. But you also have to be able to give orders, because when you're doing it properly and you're not going about it with like malintentions, like trying to just sleep with 20 people a week, other men are going to try to be like you. You have the Joe Rogans, you have the David Goggins. Those are alpha men that are doing it correctly. And look, we have our entire society that's just looking up to them like, we need to be like them. They're good-hearted individuals. They're working hard. They're leaders. They know how to present themselves. And then on top of that, the women or men, whatever your sexual orientation is, those people are also going to want to flock towards you because they see that inert trait that you have, the leadership, the knowledge, power. You're able to maintain that family or tribe or group that you are trying to be the alpha of.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see here too, if you caught that, there is a need in the world for alphas and betas and gentlemen. You have to fit into your category, and you have to do it correctly. Because as you can see, we're working off of the extremes here a little bit. And like you mentioned, alphas are leaders. So in a corporation, how many leaders do you need to have? Well, let's say one for every division, right? And but what happens when you have 3 alphas working the same position? You can run into some troubles. right? But if you have some betas in there mixed in with everything, and you have the alphas who come along and they're like, okay, well, this is how we're going to run this division, this is how it's going to be. And you have betas who are the non-confrontational type, and they're just like, oh, there's some really good ideas. Yeah, we're going to work towards that. Let's do it. They're more on board than you would having two alphas trying to present an idea.
Okay, so I have a real quick rebuttal because I do understand what you're saying, but I think it's not that you should have the betas, because I full on think that betas are a problem. Like, being a beta is a problem. Now, having certain traits where you're able to step back and say, like, yeah, I'll follow orders or whatever, that's understandable. Now, two alphas, that does cause like butting heads. You can't have them in the same position, just like you can't have two alpha gorillas or silverback gorillas. They're going to go at it until one dies. One's going to rise up as the alpha of the pack. But that's why we're going to start talking about being a gentleman, because gentleman is literally the perfect middle ground of knowing when to pull out those alpha traits, knowing when to pull out those beta traits. Not being a beta, not being an alpha all the time, but having that mental clarity of when to pull each trait out.
Perfect. So then what we're talking about here is getting away from the extremes of alpha, the extremes of beta, and we're going to define that middle ground as being a gentleman. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. And I have a definition real quick that I pulled from the internet that said that in the 21st century, being a gentleman is based on a man's values, morality, and honor. Right? These are core values that we went over last week. And if some of you guys did the exercise with us that we put on the bonus episode on Tuesday, you probably marked some of these off that you hold close to you. But things such as men who are polite, calm, and considerate are at the cornerstone for defining what it means to be a gentleman. You got to be calm in situations where people would be freaking out. It's kind of like being an alpha when all your betas are going crazy, not knowing what to do. You got to set them straight, but not give off the fear or stress of not knowing what to do. You got to tell them sternly so then they can respect you. You also have like things, chivalry. I was taught to have chivalry since I was younger. Hold doors open for people, be kind to others, don't dishonor a person's like reputation. But chivalry actually dates back to the medieval times. You knew this?
A little bit of history on the actual term, but enlighten me. I'm sure you've done more research on that term than I have.
Yeah, so it just sounds weird because I have a little speaking problem, but chivalry dates back to the medieval times because they would use it as the term to be that ideal knight. You have courage, honor, courtesy, justice, and readiness to help the weak. So you think of like a queen or a lord or king knighting somebody, it's because they have these values that they're holding true. You don't want just any Joe Schmo to be knighted, and then he's going to go around tearing the town up.
Yeah. You're not going to be a knight for going around and just helping people all the time and bending over backwards all the time. And you're also not going to get knighted for killing an entire army.
Yep. But when we're thinking gentlemen aren't the type of people that are going to be going out of their way seeking respect from others. They know their self-worth. They've done the self-reflection to realize that they shouldn't be a beta. They know what the extremes of being too much of an alpha is, so then they tone it back, and with that mental clarity of knowing your worth, the respect comes to you. The women or the men, they flock to you. You don't have to go out of your way thinking your ego is so high and you're so like hot that you should be seeking all these things out. Respect's going to come your way eventually when you're a proper gentleman.
Yeah. And that respect comes with a lot more than just the personal side, personal rewards of it. You also get a lot of that success in the workplace. you get to move forward in life, because like you're saying, as the alpha, as making the decisions and, being the gentleman making decisions, you need to make that decision yourself sometimes, and that comes with that calmness, is if there's craziness, there's chaos going on, and you're kind of looking around, seeing what's happening. Should you be the one in charge? Are you the one in charge? Because you might make that decision to yourself where it's like, I don't know enough about what's going on here, so let me just sit back, shut up, and wait for the person who's supposed to be taking care of this to take care of this,
Yeah. And I'm sure plenty of us have had those workplace alpha leaders above us that are too alpha at times, where you've had those really annoying managers or the ones that just don't respect the people under them, and it rubs you the wrong way. I'm sure everybody's had those. But then you've also had the managers that know how to lead correctly, be one of the crew, but also give out the demands that they need for the company.
Yeah.
And when you have people like that, that's when they're really showing that gentleman-like feature. Because you can have a boss anywhere that's too much of an alpha, it's just rubbing you the wrong way. But what you should strive to be when you're going for those leadership positions in your workplace should be that gentleman-like characteristic.
Yeah, and when you're true with yourself, right? Nobody's judging you but you on these things internally. You know which way you're coming from to hit being a gentleman. If you know you're coming from alpha, trying to come down to being the gentleman, or if you're a beta trying to come up to being a gentleman, there's different steps you're going to have to take. And obviously this is a lot to cover, and hopefully you guys tune in Wednesday with us as we go over the steps that you need to take to become a gentleman. But
because again, just letting you know, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. We're going really in depth in this because we feel like it's really crucial that you guys know ahead of time. So that's why we're going to kind of split this. And unfortunately, it is skipping a day where it does come out Wednesday. But stick with us. As soon as Wednesday's episode comes out, give that a look. Finish up this series with us. Let us know how you feel.
Yeah, I think, it is a lot to take in too, which is why we've definitely decided to split it up instead of just making the longer episode. And I hope that everybody is really understanding here, obviously seeing the key points here between the alpha and the beta and where we're coming at with it, because obviously everybody has their own impressions of these things. But I did some thinking on the side here as far as when we always try thinking of coming up with being the ideal person, right? And what we do here with trying to make sure people live the most structured life possible. I'm going to hit you a little curveball, and I want to know your opinion on what are some of the problems that you think a gentleman has.
That's a good one, buddy.
You want me to hit you with what I came up with first while you think on this?
Yeah, because the way I'm thinking of a gentleman is like, that's the perfect balance.
Yeah. It is. It's definitely where you want to be. But, being perfect doesn't come without consequence, right?
Yeah.
Jesus was perfect, and we all know where we put him, right? So, I dug a little bit into myself to kind of focus. And also it helps you determine what those characteristics are that help make you a gentleman. And the problem I came up with for a gentleman is that they can feel like complacency can slip in to your life as a gentleman more so than it can if you're an alpha or a beta. Because if you're an alpha or you're a beta, you have some imbalance that you're constantly chasing after. Whereas seeking that perfect balance as a gentleman, and if you're hitting your marks right, it can make you feel really complacent. And this can be an issue where today we see everything needs to be so polarizing, and it's hard to really find a match for yourself when you're comfortable, complacent, reliable. These are all great terms, and when we're talking about the personal rewards here, as far as finding somebody to be with, those terms kind of equal nowadays to you just not being fun.
I see what you're saying now. Okay, because you're not fitting that beta group. You're not fitting that alpha group. But I think that's important. You don't want to surround yourself with betas if you're trying to move away from that group and become a gentleman. You shouldn't surround yourself with a bunch of meatheads that are just bullying everybody if you're trying to be a gentleman. You know, so unfortunately it is like not a lonely road, but one that it depends on you being confident enough in yourself to really want that. And know that there's going to be struggles. There are going to be haters, you know? Screw the haters. You're going to get those in everything. Exactly. So, yeah, you might feel like people think that you're not fun, but why does that matter to you at this point? If you're making the decision to be a gentleman, other people's opinion of you shouldn't matter.
Very good at. Well, I like that. I like that a lot. You know, I think just my wrap-up point on that was the type of friendships or relationships that you're going to seek being a gentleman, you know, it's going to change, right? Because the beta they're going to be happy chasing after what they can't get, right? So in their minds and their warped, you know, sense of reality, they can go after the top tier god of whatever they want as far as like what their partner should be like. And it doesn't matter if they get that person or not, because the whole fun in the game is trying, right?
Yeah.
And then alphas are just always after the next target anyways. So there's never a point of satisfaction there either, because it doesn't really matter if you're this top tier, perfect, well-kept human being that they're trying to sleep with, or if you're just the one night stand, because they don't care. They're just trying to get their body count up. So they have these, like I said, those imbalances, those things they're always chasing. And for you, being the perfect gentleman, you're not going to be chasing those things.
Yeah, but it's important because you'll have different goals at that time.
Yeah, and, you know, I did just want to bring that point across with the gentleman and kind of just play you a little bit on that, because as far as coming across with these terms of alphas and betas and trying to work your way towards being the gentleman, I just want our viewers at home to really get a good grasp of all sides of the picture here, and including the good side, and try to see what's going on there. So I just want to make sure we give our audience enough to think about until Wednesday comes along here, where we go over these hard thought after conclusions.
So with that, please like and share this video if you can. Follow and subscribe to the page. Follow our social medias if you have Instagram, Facebook, and Parler. It's going to be the motivating force on Facebook and Parler. Instagram is going to be podcast TMF. And until then, go and get